the Joseph M. Tierney Learning Center. You're in Old Colony. Old Colony is probably the oldest Boston public housing development, and it has a unique problem. There are, in Old Colony, 550 school-age students. Those 550 students that live within these few blocks go to 75 different schools throughout Boston. So the Learning Center, we try to provide the place for them to be a community together. A community to learn, a community to laugh, and a community to grow. We offer a range of programs, classes and workshops such as literacy, nutrition, computers, music and film production, art and poetry, career development, parenting, and we're starting our first Legos robotics program starting next week. Really want to thank ABCD for stepping out of the box. I want to thank Beacon for sort of creating this, letting us come in and sort of work here and have a lot of fun. The significance of this program and of this center is exemplified by the people who are here. We have the Tierney family. We have Consul Lehane, obviously Dennis Lehane, and the Tierney family, Deirdre, Mara, Joe, and Mother Pat, who can't be here, regrettably. And all you schools coming out. I really appreciate that.
I want to thank you so much, and everybody that works here and everybody that volunteers here, and we want to thank Dennis for sharing his time and his talent and his books. And we're just very happy and proud to have our dad's name on such a special place. And we look forward to staying involved with all the work that you're doing here. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'm thrilled to introduce Dennis. Dennis grew up in Dorchester, kind of close to here. Before he became a full-time writer, if I remember correctly, you were a counselor with adults and with children. You waited some tables, parked some cars, drove a limo. I believe you worked in a bookstore and you even loaded a tractor trailer. There we go. How he became a full-time writer, I'm not really sure, but he's won numerous awards for his novels. 3 of them are movies you probably heard of: Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, which was actually filmed right over there, and Shutter Island. Dennis serves on the Board of Trustees for the Boston Public Library, and he understands the importance of literacy and the reason that this center needs to be here. Dennis and I met many years ago in high school down at BC High. And when I called and I told him about this center and a call for help, didn't hesitate at all. He came and he's here to support us in the center and our mission. Thank you, Dennis.
Just on the other side of the Southie line, we used to disagree with people from Southie every now and then. Sometimes, well, let me put it in perspective. The first time I was ever in in the Old Colony projects, none of this was here, by the way. It started kind of there. We were playing baseball right there. And we were probably about 10 or 11. And all the stock kids came down and get a game going, and we were playing baseball on that field. And these Southie kids from the projects started to kind of roll on over and just kind of watch our game, which we thought was nice. It was like, you know, it was like peace. It was like Israel and Palestine kind of, you know, getting together. And then they kept getting closer and closer to the field. And we thought, that's, you know, a little odd. And then we looked up, and they were all booking back across here, and they had our bats, and they had our gloves, and they had everything, right? So then we went running after them, and because they were little, because we figured, you know, we can beat their ass, right? So we went running across, and we ran through there, and we went deep into the projects, and all of a sudden they all turned, and they looked back at us, and they started laughing. And these huge guys came out behind them. And they were like, come on, you want your bats? We're like, no, we're good. We're good. We're all good. We can now go back and kick the ball in the field. So that's how I lost my first baseball glove. That's how I first saw the Old Colony housing development. So yeah, I feel a lot of warmth right now. Okay, I was here to talk a little bit about how I got from Dorchester to where I'm at now. How did I get here? Why did I become a writer? Let's start there. The major reason, there's a couple of reasons I became a writer. One was the hours. I really like the hours. I heard that I could sleep until as late as I want, and I still do, about Not so much now I have kids, but until very recently, I slept as late as I felt like, and I stayed up as late as I wanted to because I'm a really overgrown adolescent. So that was number one, the dress code. Dress code, big fan of the dress code. I hate ties. I don't like ties. I don't particularly like to shave. You guys are really lucky. I combed my hair today. Usually it's baseball hat time. So this is as nice as I dress. So that's I think another compelling reason to do what I do. I didn't do anything else well. In fact, nothing. Truly nothing. And if you guys are lucky enough in your life, in all seriousness, to find one thing that you do well, that you love, cling to it. Cling to it like your hands are made of glue. Don't let it go. And that's not to say if it's one thing that you love. I loved baseball. I love baseball like you wouldn't believe. I tried to be a baseball player. Here's the sad thing. I sucked at baseball. This wasn't a good baseball player. At the end of the day, I had to make a decision that it was an unrealistic goal. But I loved writing, and I was very good at writing. And people started to tell me about writing. People started to say, you should maybe continue doing this. You should think about this. And I kept doing it. Another reason I think I ended up becoming a writer is because the Irish, and my parents are both from Ireland, the Irish don't really like facts all that much. They're not, they're not real comfortable with them. They love a great story. They love a type of truth, but facts, yeah, facts not so much. So I grew up in a storytelling culture. I grew up where people got together every weekend and they told stories about the old country. And they told the same stories about every fourth week, except they changed them, usually the endings. So they would lie, essentially. They would get together every week and they would drink and they would lie. And I thought, that's in my blood now. So when I first went to school, when I left, when we all graduated and I went off to college, my first major was journalism. But I realized something that was a problem, at least back then in journalism, which was I didn't like facts. So I stopped being a journalism major and realized I should probably be a storyteller because that's the world I grew up in. It's not just the Irish world I grew up in. Bostonians have a very interesting relationship with the facts. I have people thank me on a regular basis for writing Mystic Pizza. That's now pretty much a fact. The number of people who thank me for writing The Departed is endless. Apparently if there's a movie made in this city, and there's a bar, and there's a gun, I wrote it. So I got really glowing letters, received beautiful letters from people telling me how much they enjoyed The Departed. I was in a bar actually in Charlestown once, and I went in and I sat down and a guy said to me, and it was a tiny bar, there was only 3 people in it, and that was as many as it could fit. And the guy said, the bartender said, "You look like the guy who wrote Mystic River." And I said, "Well, I am the guy who wrote Mystic River." He said, "Oh my God, that's the guy who wrote Mystic River." This guy stands up off his bar stool and he goes, "You're the guy who wrote The Departed?" And I said, "No, I wrote Mystic River." And he goes, "What's Jack Nicholson like?" I said, "I have no idea, I wrote Mystic River." And they're all shouting at him and they're saying, "He wrote Gone Baby Gone, he wrote Shutter Island, sit down, shut up." And he would sit down for a minute and then he'd get up and he'd come back and he'd go, "So what's Matt Damon like?" I have no idea. But I know that from that point on, as far as everybody in that bar was concerned, I wrote The Departed. I know Matt Damon quite well. I think Jack Nicholson's a good guy. Whatever the story was. Again, Bostonians and facts. The other thing that was lucky for me was I did love to read, which where I came from was a bit of a problem. So it wasn't like I was advertising it. I wasn't telling people I like to read. I sort of kept it to myself. But I read, and I read constantly. The fact that I had mentors, if you guys have somebody who takes their time out to show interest in you and what you want to do, who takes that seriously, that's gold. That's real gold. Because nobody, when you ask yourself the question, how full of it are the people who are in your life trying to help you, ask yourself what they're getting from it. It's truly. Nobody's making money, that's for sure. If somebody reaches out to you, and they're honestly reaching out to you, and they believe in you, try and give it back to them a little bit. They do believe in you for a reason. They believe in you because you're worthwhile. So I had some great mentors. My first one was at BC High. I was a little tiny priest named Larry Corcoran. I don't know if you remember him, Steve. And he was the first person to read something I wrote and say, "You're really good at this. You should think about doing this more." He didn't overplay it. He didn't say, "You're going to be the next Hemingway," but he said, "You know, you should think about doing this." So I did. Another reason I got into writing, I don't know if this affects half the population of this room, but it certainly affects the other half. Chicks dig writers. It's as simple as that. Nobody who looks like me should get the level of hot women I've had in my life. And particularly when I was broke and poor. I wasn't just broke and poor, I was artistic and starving for my art. So, and I don't know why, but women like that, particularly in their 20s. By their 30s, they kind of get over it. But in their 20s, they really dig it. So that was another reason, which if you understand, if you hear, there's a lot of reasons most guys go into the arts. Most straight guys, obviously. I also had another big advantage, which was I won the parental lottery. My household, I'll say, when I went home into my house, it was not 1980s Boston, it was 1940s Ireland. And they didn't really care how we did in America. And they didn't really care about the times. They were stuck back 40, 50 years ago in their generation and in their value system. And I hated it. And I look back and I go, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because the one thing we had going through that door was we had a sense of security, we had a sense of constancy. And our parents loved us. They loved us in the old school way. They didn't love us in the let's have a group hug and talk it out kind of way. The Irish don't really go in for that. They loved us in the we're going to put food on your table kind of way and try and keep you on the straight and narrow kind of way, and not let you take the easy road and not let you take the easy route out. One of the things people will say to me, which I find kind of insulting sometimes, is because my parents were immigrants, they'll say, well, they just assumed that they didn't want me to become a writer. And I find that kind of insulting, because my parents did. They weren't quite sure what the hell I was doing, to be honest. My father, until my 5th book came out, my father would call me every time the post office was hiring. You know, he would. He'd hear about, you know, oh, Boston Gas is going to be bringing in 20 people, and he'd call me about it. I'd be like, Dad, you know, I'd love to, but I can't take the pay cut, you know. And it's worth noting that my father never read one of my books, never once. But he didn't read. He read nonfiction, but he didn't understand fiction. He didn't get fiction. He didn't understand why people would read something that was made up. So he wouldn't read my books, but he would lie to everybody and tell them he did, which I thought was really cool. I'd like find him like in a room and he'd be like, "Oh, that Mystic River, that was a fine book." I'd say, "You don't read a freaking word." And he'd say, "They don't know that, you know." My parents did not stand my word. My parents said, "This is insane that you're going to try and become a writer, but let's face it, you're not good at anything else. So if you're going to do it, could you at least do it where you could build a safety net for yourself? Could you do it on a more traditional path than you're planning? Could you not drop out of school?" And I said, "Okay, fine." That was the deal. So I stayed in school. So I had the degree. So I had a safety net if I needed it. And Steve, let me just tell you something about Mr. Fulton, who was just standing up in front of you. He was the really smart one. He was in all the honors classes. I was squeaking out a C at best in high school, and I was trying real hard for that C, which is kind of sad. But I worked really hard for my C's, and I got through high school just sort of barely, and then I got into college. It wasn't exactly a big name college, but it was college. And I worked really hard, and I tried to become a writer, and I built this safety net. I got this safety net. The final reason I'm a writer, and I can't underscore this enough, in fact, I would say it's really the top 10 reasons, 1 through 10, and the 9 I just told you are the next 9. The major reason I'm a writer is because of libraries, is because of a type of community outreach. I'm a writer because, and I'm a reader because my parents couldn't afford to buy books. We couldn't have books hanging around the house. That was a luxury. So my mother took me when the nuns, and the only nice thing that a nun ever did for me, told my mother that I liked to read. She took me to the Uplands Corner Library, and I would walk there every day, and I would grab books, and I would read them. And then I remember going when I was about 10 or 11 years old to the Boston Public Library. Anybody been to the main branch? Anybody ever been inside this building? It's incredible. And for a kid from Edward Square to walk into this building, this incredible building with beautiful paintings everywhere, beautiful marble, statues, just it looks like something that should be in Rome. What that said to me was that I mattered, that I was just as valuable as any other kid in the city, that I had just as much right to take a book out as any other kid in the city, as the kid whose father dropped him off from the Bentley. I was just as valuable. What a library said to me was the city cared about me. People cared about me. That's what I think this center says. People care. People are reaching out. And if you take the hand, it can lead to wonderful places. So at the end of the day, those are my major reasons for standing before you. That is my weird path for standing before you. Take some questions, a little better than me just prodding them along. Anybody got a question over there? Yes.
And could you share with us, when you first started to enjoy writing, what did you enjoy and what kept you writing and kept working?
I enjoy making stuff up. I enjoy sitting in rooms and thinking, wouldn't it be cool if... I enjoy being a storyteller first. And then everything else that goes with it is something I've learned. But people in Dorchester know how to talk. They really know how to talk. The city neighborhoods, people know how to tell stories. They really do. And I love that, and I love hearing them. And I love the oddness of Boston. Boston, by the way, for those of you who've never traveled, and I'd never traveled until I was like 19, I've not traveled everywhere. Boston is unlike any place in the world. It truly is. It is a particularly unique place, and there's very few of those left in America. I'd say Boston, New York, Philly, Chicago, and then, yeah, New Orleans, and maybe Miami, but there's very few unique places left. And Boston, I try to explain to people, it's not the accents, it's this attitude. And the attitude is just a little nuts. People in Boston are just a little bit nuts. And I can say that because I'm a Bostonian. And I try to explain to somebody, I was looking for the voice. I was in graduate school, I was in Miami, and I was trying to get the Boston voice. And I couldn't get it. I could feel it slipping away on me. I wasn't a strong enough writer because I was hearing too much Miami, and a southern voice was starting to slip in. And I went back home and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was kind of a brawler. And I ran into him and I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "I'm all right. Well, actually, I got stabbed." And I said, "Okay, you know." And he goes, "And I don't know what you've heard, but it can kind of take the fight out of you." That was the line. I don't know what you've heard in the first place. As if there's somebody out there who's heard like getting stabbed is fun, right? And then, but it can kind of take the fight out of you. Like, I just went, oh, I'm home. I got it. I'm good. And the voice now, it's now locked in. But that Boston voice, that weird, you know, I'll give you another anecdote that I love. We were in Charlestown. My wife is not from here at all. And she was trying to understand that there used to be this Charlestown that, like, you know, Ben Affleck talks about in the town that I write about in Mystic River a little bit. And I said, "No, honey, this town is here. Trust me, you just haven't seen it yet, you know." And she was like, "I don't know. This looks pretty yuppie to me." And then we were at the playground, and my daughter was just learning to walk, and there was a tiny woman sitting in the playground, and you could spot her a mile off. She had like the cheap white cotton T-shirt with the American flag on it. She had a Benson and Hedges Deluxe Ultralight the size of a Scud missile hanging out of her mouth, right? And she's sitting there. She's got 3 kids, and they all come from 3 different fathers, right? And we walk in, and she's talking to us, and my little girl is she's just learning how to walk. She's just standing there. And 2 of this woman's sons are buzzing around in a plastic car. And the woman's talking to us, and she's perfectly pleasant, and all of a sudden she reaches up and she grabs the plastic car. And she says to the little boy, she says, "You're scaring the little girl. I told you to stop. If I have to tell you again, I'm taking you back to the playground on the friggin' projects. We'll see how you like it. You get shot." And my wife, who's from small town New York, she was like, "So okay, we're gonna go," and the woman goes, "God bless," right? That's Boston. That's what I'm writing about. That to me is everything, and I think that's where it all started. It started with knowing that these voices were unique and trying to duplicate that. And I think part of the problem that writers have is they try to write initially. Initially you have to. Initially you just steal. Any of you who are trying to write, as a writer, you steal. You steal from other writers who you admire until your own voice bubbles up. Don't worry, you're not publishing it. Nobody's going to say it, you know, you're stealing. It's okay. Write like people you admire. So that's in play. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. If you are writing ultimately and you say nobody is writing like me, I must be doing something wrong. No, it means you're doing something right. If your story is unique, if your voice is unique, you're doing something right. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for an original voice. They're not looking for the same old thing. Yes, sir. Front.
Got a mic.
Hey, Joseph. How are you?
Have you ever had a writer that you like really admired yourself?
Have I ever had a writer that I really admired myself? The biggest influence on me was a guy named Richard Price. And he wrote a book that I wrote when I was 14 called The Wanderers, and it was about kids in the Bronx in the 1960s. But it was the first time I read a book where I recognized the people in it. It suddenly wasn't a fantastical world like kings and princes or Jay Gatsby in his mansion. These were people who were like firemen and kids in gangs and regular working class people. And I remember reading that book and feeling like, I can do this. I can write about what I understand of the world. And what I understood of the world was 02125. That was my zip code. That's what I understood. That's what. Anybody else 02125? All right. Well done. That's what I got. You know. And then that led me to read all these other writers who he had been influenced by. And then it just opened up a world to me. Like at the end of the day, people say, are you a mystery novelist, are you a crime novelist, are you a literary novelist, are you a, what are you? You know, I get that a lot. And I say, I'm an urban novelist. That's it. At the end of the day, put that on my headstone. I'm happy. I write about a city, or I write about cities. But I am fascinated by the way cities work or don't work. And I'm fascinated by urban experience. And somebody will say to me, well, why don't you write about this? Or why don't you write about that? Because I don't care. I care about this. This is what I know how to do. And I don't feel the need to really mix it up beyond that. So I just want to keep writing. I heard too many good stories when I was a kid. I want to keep telling them. So that's my ambition. Yes, ma'am.
Do you get any negative comments about stereotyping in any way? Just curious.
About stereotyping?
Yeah, in any way, particular.
Hopefully not. I don't think I stereotype. I get a little bit of, we could have lived without that portrayal. We could live with it. The Boston Globe tried to take me to the woodshed for writing too much about, you know, violence and poverty in the city, and giving the city a black eye. And I said, wait a second, and I got really hot about that, and ended up writing to the Globe and saying, what I write about is Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury is pretty much my, and a little bit of South Boston, but that I am looking at, you know, that sort of general area. That's where I grew up. 73% of the murders in this city come from there. That means that we have a major crime problem. And you guys just saying we shouldn't talk about the black eye in the city because we want to sell papers to people in Wellesley annoys me. So. So that's it, and I'm drawn to stories like that, and I don't feel like I should have to apologize for it. If I write stereotypes, please take me to the woodshed, but I think I've tried to avoid that. The only thing I once got a letter from somebody who said, it was great, I framed it. Oh, but I lost the frame. A woman wrote me this, it was practically in crayon, and she said, I just read Gone Baby Gone. She started off, dear Mr. Lehane, she kind of tried to seduce me in the letter. She was like, dear Mr. Lehane, many people have told me what a wonderful writer you are. I picked up Gone Baby Gone and had like a beautiful cover. It is a disgraceful book. You are a disgusting human being. You're a blight on the great neighborhood of Dorchester. And I thought, me? All the other crappy things that have come out of Dorchester, you're going to come at me? So I framed it for a while. I had it up, you know, up on top of my fridge. But that's pretty much the only thing I get. Every now and then people say, how dare you tell about the warts and all? But I think the vast majority of people say, I think I paint a picture of urban life in this city that is warts and all. I think I'm saying, look, you know, if you can find something better than an impromptu block party in the 02125 zip code on a Saturday afternoon, on a Friday night after work, I'd like to know what that is, because that's a slice of heaven I remember from being a kid. At the same time, I'm not going to hide from the fact that this is also where 73% of the crime is in the city. I mean, certainly 73% of the homicides. And I want to write about that, and I want to look at that, and I want to know why that is. And I also want to know why the cycle hasn't been broken yet. You know, when everybody talks about gentrification, you always hear, oh, it's going to get down to Dorchester. Really? Because I've watched the cycle 6 times, and it never happens. And you can rename the neighborhoods all you want, like they did. I can't remember what they call it now. We used to know it as Hancock Hill. I forget what they've changed the name, which is where St. Margaret's Hospital used to be. They've given it a really pretty name. And I'm like, you can rename it all you want. You know what I mean? It's still Stoughton Street. You know, it's still a rough part of town. And it's not trickling down there yet. And I don't know what it's going to take. I think it's going to take more rolling up of the sleeves. I think it's going to take more honest dialogue. I think it's going to take more outreach. I think it's going to take more community engagement on every level before this stuff stops. You know?
Well, thank you for your truths.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'll try. I promise to try and continue to stay away from stereotypes. Write me an angry letter if I go.
When you were saying you were inspired by Richard Price,
Yeah.
a lot of my students are really into memoirs.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
they've read, you know, authors who have written memoirs about growing up in Boston area.
Yeah.
So have you ever considered becoming an urban memoirist?
No. I don't want to write about myself. The thing is I'm not a terribly interesting human being. And I didn't have a terribly interesting life. I had a very interesting life in terms of listening and watching the stories of those around me. So to write about, you know, what do you say? You know, when people say, how did you end up in crime fiction, if you will, with such a literary background? I say, I didn't have the autobiographical novel in me. I thought, well, you know, what am I going to write? White kid goes to college? I think we've seen that. I think we've read that a lot. So I just didn't see the interesting part of my life, and I still don't. I don't find much of my upbringing terribly unique, except that I was an Irish kid with Irish parents, which certainly colorful, but not enough to write about. I find a lot of good memoirs out there, and then I find a lot of them that just navel gazing, man. I mean, just stop looking at yourself and look out the window a little bit more, could you? You know, it's my kind of vibe sometimes with a memoir. So. Yes, somebody else.
What is your latest book that we should be expecting, and is there anything in production?
My latest book comes out in 10 days. It's called Live by Night. It's my gangster novel. It's about a guy rising up to the gangster business in the bootlegging business in Boston during Prohibition, and that's my. I've been dying to write that book since I was about 8 years old. So it's really I had a lot of fun. So I think it's going to be a good book. I think my wife tells me it is. She never lies to me. That's that. In production. It's a weird situation. I've got a lot of irons in the fire. I have a film that was supposed to be shooting right now called Animal Rescue. It was supposed to be shooting, and then it just fell apart at the last minute for a number of reasons I can't talk about. I've just been asked to create a TV show for Lawrence Fishburne, the actor, set in about prison, about a prison warden. So I'm doing that. I had a show just come back to me that was with FX for 2 years, and then I'm also going to do. I'd like to do something. I'm set to write a script on. I don't know. Only a couple of people even remember this. Does anybody remember the McLaughlin Wars in the '60s in Charlestown? There was a it's an amazing story. A guy hit on a woman in a bar. And 4 years later, 50 people were dead because of it. It was the biggest Irish mob war in the 20th century, basically. And it fascinates me that it was all over that tiny little event. And as you understand, the Winter Hill Gang only exists because of that war, and it's called the McLaughlin War. So I think I'm going to do that next, and then I'm contracted for 4 more books. So I'm busy. And I got kids. it's fun. I don't even know how I'm gonna, in fact, I'm gonna leave. Yes, yes.
I wanted to ask you, for any becoming writer,
Yep.
what skills would you recommend to them?
The single biggest thing, and if you roll your eyes, you should then think about doing something else. You can't be a writer unless you read. It's as simple as that. You gotta read. It's like people saying, I want to be a doctor. Trust me with the scalpel. Why? Because I watch a lot of ER. I mean, no, I'm not. You have to read. They go together. So I think beyond that, writers only have a couple of skills. There's only a couple that matter. There's only a couple of major tools in the toolbox, but they take a lot of time to learn. I was born with an ear, because I grew up in a place where people talked really vividly. You do too. So you might want to start cultivating your ear. First thing is how do people really talk? Not the way you want them to talk when you write, but how do they really talk? Here's the first thing I say to all students about dialogue. You're using people's names too much. Way too much. That's how you can tell somebody who doesn't have an ear yet. Because most people who know each other don't call each other by their own name. You don't say, hi Mary, how are you? I'm very good, Cindy, how about you? I was about to go to the store, Mary, would you like to join me? I'd love to, Cindy. Nobody does that. And yet they always do it in student fiction. So that's like the first rule I'd ever give you is that I read a short story once where the characters go the entire short story without ever calling each other by their name. And then when they do, there's no exclamation point, there's no italicizing, there's anything. He just says Ted, she says Mary, and you know it's war. You know, because then, that's the only time I call my wife by her name, when I'm feeling very, very much in love, or very, very angry, right? You know, and then it's all of a sudden, Angie! So that's just one trick. But the other thing is just to listen. I remember the first time I realized nobody where I grew up says, what the hell? Nobody says, what the hell are you doing? They say, the hell. I remember that moment. I remember that. I was like 15, and I remember just going, it was as if the sky opened up. And I began to, from that point on, always write that when I wrote dialogue. Nobody would ever say, what the hell? They would say, how are you doing? How are you thinking? How are you thinking doing that? You know, and that's just the beginning. And once you start to tune the ear, you don't lose it. And what happens is then you go down, my friends used to make fun of me because I turned into this really bad, like, I was like a Zelig, you won't get the reference, but I was that person who wherever I went, I would pick up the cadence of people who I was around. It's really annoying, actually. I talk to Irish people and I slip into an Irish accent, it's really, and they want to beat me, you know, because I'm like, oh really? I went down south to go to school, and I started coming back, and I had the most deranged accent on the planet because I still had my Boston accent, and I picked up a Southern accent, and I'd be like, y'all want to go out for a beer? You know? Everybody like, what the hell's wrong with you? Pick one. But that came from just, the ear was so tuned by that point, and then every other skill as a writer, which I would say, the ability to say describe things, the ability to tell a story, the ability to keep things moving, the ability to write with depth, to say something interesting about your life, about life. All of that has to be learned, and it comes to a lot of practice. But if you have one skill to walk through that door with by the time you get to, say, college age, you're great. Trust me. All I could do was write dialogue. Everything I wrote when I first got into college was just a bunch of stories with he said and she said after them. And then it would just be like, there was a tree, there was a car, all right, the house was red. Move on, get them talking again, because I'm not good at that stuff, you know? And then by the time I was 30, I could describe this pretty well, you know? But it took time, so I just played to my strength. Pick up that one skill, and also ask yourself why the people if you like reading, there's some writers you like the most. Ask yourself who they are and why. Define that, because it has something to do with your own skill. It's in there. It's trying to get out. I always love people who were dialogue driven. That's it, you know. So, so that's my piece of advice. Thank you. Anybody? Yes.
Did you like the way that the movies came out?
Did I like the way the movies came out? Yeah, I did. I really did. My favorite I don't know why this is. Maybe because there was the most distance between writing the book and seeing the movie, which gave me a little bit more perspective. But my favorite was Gone Baby Gone. To this day, it is. It's the one that is the most Boston. It's a Boston movie. I mean, that was not. You could not make that movie the way he made that movie unless you're from here. And I loved that, and I love the fact that he shot it 100% in my neighborhood. And you know, not 100%, but the vast majority of it was right in the neighborhood of the book. To the point where, and I'll give you a little anecdote, this is cute. There's only one person in my life who I've ever based on, a real person, ever. And it's the mother of Gone Baby Gone. And there's a scene where Casey Affleck is talking to her. Amy Ryan played her in the movie. It's a great performance. He's talking to her, and over her shoulder is the real house where she lived. The real person lived. And I told that to Ben, and he freaked out. I told Amy Ryan, she freaked out. I mean, it was just by steeping himself so deep in that area, a lucky thing happened. They had no idea. I mean, he wasn't like, I know that. He didn't know anything about it. He was like, there was a real Lehane? Why didn't you tell me? I'd like to meet her. You know? And I was like, no, trust me, I don't want to get sued. But the real Lehane came up to me. Here's what happens when you write real people. The real Lehane came up to me to sign it. It wasn't for Gone Baby Gone. It was for a later book. I look up and there she is. And I was like, oh boy. Because, you know, part of being out in public is you do get a little freaked out about something weird could happen if you anger the wrong person. I look up and there's this person who I based this character on, right? So maybe the most disgusting character I've ever created, right? You know, the worst mother in history. And there she is, standing in front of me. She gets up and she goes, so can I ask you something about Gone Baby Gone? And I was like, okay. And she said, where'd you come up with that Lehane character? I hated her. There you go.
What about character? How do you, I mean, obviously you build a lot of character, but you said you only based that one on an actual person?
I don't like basing people on people because A, they can usually figure it out and they feel bad. Their feelings get hurt. I don't like to hurt people's feelings. Two, you get too hung up in what the real person does. That's the problem, or did. And that screws up your ability to see what should dramatically happen, what should happen, not what did happen. I'm after dramatic truth. I'm not after factual truth. I don't like facts. So I'm after the sort of organic truth of the piece. And basically I want the story to take me where the story is supposed to take me, not where I want it to go. If that makes a little bit of sense. You gotta have this weird touch when you write. So in terms of building character, the best thing to figure out, if you can write these things down for yourself when you try to build a character. Figure out what they want out of life. That's very important. It'll drive a plot. That's really what drives a plot, what a character wants. And then you try to figure out what they need. And it's often a very different thing. And so what that means is, I'll put it in the easiest perspective I can think of. Do you know the basic story of Casablanca? Okay. In Casablanca, he has two clear wants. They're really clear, and they drive the entire movie. Number one is to stay out of World War II, and number two is to get the girl. In the end, what he needs is to rediscover his soul. He sold off his soul years before, and he needs to get it back. He doesn't know that. So in the end, guess what he has to do? Is to join the war and give up the girl. It's the only way he can get his soul back. You have to give up what you want to get what you need. So that's usually where I start with the characters. I usually start either with what they want, or I try and figure out what their flaw is. What don't they know about themselves that they need to... My first book, A Drink Before the War, was about racism. It was fueled by the Charles Stewart case, you know, even though it's not remotely in the book. And it was fueled by how the city was ripping itself apart in the late 80s and early 90s with racism. And I wrote a book in which a white private investigator gets caught in the middle of sort of a black war. Now that book is not interesting unless he figures out at some point during the book that he's a racist. Not interesting. It's the crucial moment in the book is when he goes through the entire book thinking, I'm just a cool white guy, and then all of a sudden he gets his back against the wall and he starts spewing racist shit. Excuse my French, sorry. And that was what's interesting to me. What's his flaw? What is he going to learn about himself? What does he find out about who he is as a person that he needs to either rectify or he needs to grow from? And that was it. There was my answer. And that gave me a book. you know? So sometimes, it's a great line, any of you aspiring writers, remember this. The playwright David Mamet said this. If a character wants something, even if it's as simple as a loaf of bread, the audience will follow until they get it or they don't. Don't start a story with somebody laying in their bed thinking, which is how everybody starts stories when they start to write. He was thinking about the time back way before the audience really cares when he did this. No, you start off with, Bill wanted a glass of milk. Bill goes to the fridge. You're with me. Trust me, you're still reading. Bill opens the fridge. There's no milk. There's no milk, or it's spoiled. Or, hey, there's milk, yay! Pours the milk, he curdles. That's called a reversal, by the way. Reversal of expectation. Now the milk's cracked. He goes out to get the milk. You're still reading. Trust me. And the journey begins. That's what writing is. It's a journey. So our story is a journey. And so the character wants something. It's way better than a character sitting in a room thinking. Sitting in rooms thinking kills more student fiction than TV. TV is really bad too. Good TV is great. If you're watching Breaking Bad, fantastic. If you're watching the Kardashians, stop.
Good evening, everyone. I will be brief because I don't like to stand between anyone and their pizza. But I do feel like I need to give a shout out to 02126. Where I grew up. And so all I want to do is, on behalf of ABCD, welcome you. Thank you for coming. Thank Dennis Lehane. This is just a wonderful, wonderful gift for us. And it's, you know, it's what ABCD is all about, is really trying to inspire youth and keep them educating themselves, opening new opportunities. And so we're so grateful for you to come by and speak to everyone and continue the evening at the BC High reception. I also wanted to thank the Tierney family for their continued support, lending obviously the name to this building, and for their continuous support around the work that we do, that we're going to do, and Stephen will do in this center. For those of you who don't know, this center is really is a collaboration between ABCD and Beacon Communities. Pam Goodman is here. Thanks for her leadership. And the Boston Housing Authority and residents and community members in Old Colony and around. And so we're just so excited to continue to do good things. It's new, and we're, oh, thank you, Maura Tierney, for being here as well. I saw your sister, Deirdre, is that in the background? So thank you, Deirdre and Maura, especially for being here. This is wonderful.
And Joe.
And Joe. Oh, I didn't meet Joe, so nice to meet you too. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. But I'll close, let you eat your pizza, and on behalf of ABCD, thank you for staying.